U.S. attack on Venezuela that is contrary to international law is part of American foreign policy. The American constitutional order is not functioning right now. When it comes to international law, it has been blatant neglect. We have this dual issue of a collapse of our constitutional order and a president who is a megalomaniac, who believes really that he does rule single-handedly. We're witnessing a deliberate destabilization.
Hello and welcome to this very first episode of Tracking Trump in the New Year. I'm Nidhi Razdan. And what an extraordinary start it has been to 2026, with President Trump's decision to invade a sovereign country, Venezuela, and literally kidnap its president by American forces. Now, make no mistake, what Donald Trump has done over the last few days has repercussions not only for the Western Hemisphere that the US is now trying to dominate, but for the entire world. There are so many questions that emanate from these developments. The first is, what happens to the international rules-based order, to the sovereignty of nations? How could the United States undertake an act like this without approval from the US Congress, let alone the United Nations? Is Greenland going to be next? And the White House has indicated that that is very much on the agenda. What are the implications of that for Europe and the rest of the world? And what about Russia and China? After what America has done in Venezuela, what stops the Russians and the Chinese from doing the same with, say, Taiwan or other countries because they want to dominate their spheres of influence? There are so many things to unravel here, and there's no better person to do that with than Professor Jeffrey Sachs, renowned economist, professor at Columbia University, someone who is so well known for his development work around the world, trying to uplift people out of extreme poverty, using sustainable development, having been an advisor to so many governments, a special advisor to the UN Secretary General as well. Professor Sachs, it's wonderful to have you back on DeKoder with us today.
Well, I'm very honored to be with you. Thank you so much.
I first wanted to ask you, we're all trying to scratch our heads to understand what exactly has happened and why this has happened. Why do you think Trump chose this particular time to invade Venezuela? What was it? Was it personal glory? Was it to distract from other uncomfortable headlines? What do you think it was?
First, I think it's very important to understand that what has happened, a U.S. attack on Venezuela that is contrary to international law, is part of American foreign policy. So this is not a rupture with American foreign policy. It is shocking, it is crude, it is dangerous, but it is also part of how the United States has operated at least for the last 80 years, that is since the end of World War II. If you make a serious count of so-called regime change operations, meaning that the U.S. government tries to change the government in power, I would say that they number about 100 such episodes in the last 80 years, 100. There's been a very authoritative study in 2018 by the political scientist Lindsay O'Rourke at Boston College, where she counted 70 regime change operations between 1947 and 1989. And there have been at least 30, I would judge, since then. Now, the count is a little bit tricky because often the CIA does it secretly or covertly, or at least with deniability, whereas Trump is with a megaphone saying, we run Venezuela and we will do the same with other places, whether it's Greenland or other places on Donald Trump's immediate list. So the first point I want to make is one of continuity rather than rupture. Now, all of these interventions, in my opinion, are against international law, because the idea of the United Nations in 1945 was that to stop the scourge of war, there should be rules of how states behave. And in Article 2, Section 4 of the UN Charter, it says that no country can threaten, much less undertake force to compel another country in its behavior, in its internal affairs, or to affect the territorial integrity of that country. Despite that, the U.S. has done this for a living because it's an empire. It's powerful. It learned most of its lessons from the British Empire, so I don't have to say too much to an Indian public about that. Britain acted as it wanted to. It did not act according to international law. And even though the United States, in a way, founded the United Nations, led by our greatest president, Franklin Roosevelt, the fact of the matter is the United States tears up the UN Charter when it wants to. Just to put in specific context, in the last 20 years, the United States used the CIA to overthrow the government of Syria. The United States used NATO to overthrow the government of Libya. The United States used covert means to help overthrow the government of Ukraine in 2014. And now the United States has used brazen, open force boasted by the U.S. president to run Venezuela. Now, why did Trump do this now? Trump has basically become unleashed in two senses. One, the American constitutional order is not functioning right now. People should understand this. Congress almost doesn't exist as an actual maker of U.S. policy. All the tariffs that India suffered from the U.S. in the past year came from one person, Donald Trump, not from the U.S. Congress, not from a legal or constitutional process, but rather from an executive order, which in my view is blatantly illegal and unconstitutional. But what the courts decide on that is yet another matter. But reading the Constitution, it says that the power of tariffs is with the legislative branch, not with the executive branch. Now, because we don't have a constitutional order in the United States, Trump is unleashed. And this raises a second issue, which is Trump's personality. He is impulsive, grandiose, a megalomaniac, filled with statements which I believe are delusional. But the fact is that we have this dual issue of a collapse of our constitutional order and a president who is a megalomaniac, who believes really that he does rule single-handedly. When a congressman said a couple of days ago, this is unconstitutional, Trump mocked him. What are you talking about? I decide these things. Trump announces, well, Venezuela will give us 50 million barrels of oil, by the way, which might have come to Indian refineries under contract. They'll give us this oil, and I'll control the money. This is, of course, devoid of a shred of law or legitimacy. But for the moment, Trump is acting like a Roman emperor rather than an American president in the constitutional order.
I think just sorry to interrupt there, but there are so many issues that stem from how you've summarized all of this. The first is that the fact that he doesn't have US congressional approval for this action. And as you pointed out, this is a continuity in US foreign policy, but didn't many of these previous regime changes have that fig leaf of the US Congress going along with it, or the United Nations? And the fact that it's absent this time completely, what are the ramifications, for American institutions and for Congress in particular? You already said there is a clearly a institutional crisis that America faces right now. Is the US Congress not able to stand up to him at all? Are they not pushing back hard enough?
Yes. So let me say that I think these interventions, the 100 or so that I've discussed all over the world, have almost never even had a fig leaf of UN support, but they have, as you say, sometimes had a legality stated around U.S. law, some kind of congressional authorization of the use of military force. Here, there's none whatsoever. Indeed, there clearly were direct lies to leading congressional committees in the run up to this, and no pretense of following any laws in the aftermath of the attack of a few days ago. When it comes to international law, it has been blatant neglect. Indeed, the Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, mocked the United Nations a couple of days ago, openly mocked it. This is the American mindset in this leadership group right now, that there is no international law, that the UN is a joke in their view, and that domestically they can do what they want. What are the ramifications of this? Well, I think for us as Americans, it is that we're seeing the end of our constitutional order. It's not put that way, but I have to say, even when the Roman Republic ended and the Roman Empire began with emperors, and this is usually dated to 27 BC with the rise of Augustus, the first of the emperors and the formal end of the Roman Republic, the institutions of the Republic continued for decades as if nothing had changed. Of course, everything had changed in terms of how power was actually used. But formally, no. And I think we're in this situation. It didn't come all of a sudden. It did not come with Donald Trump alone. Every recent president has grossly abused the constitutional order. The CIA, in my opinion, is our most dangerous and failed institution. It was created in 1947 as a secret institution, unaccountable to politics, unaccountable to public opinion, unaccountable even to the truth, because what it does is never told. Everything is confidential, or everything is denied, even when the role is obvious. To Trump's credit, if I could put credit in quotation marks, he announced that he had tasked the CIA last month with taking actions, covert actions inside Venezuela. So he actually told us, because Trump's a megalomaniac. At least he tells us what he's doing. But this has been going on for quite a long time. Now, the question you asked is extremely pertinent. What are the implications of this? To my mind, extraordinarily dangerous. You have this nuclear superpower that feels unconstrained by norms, by ethics, by international law, or by the U.S. Constitution. It's very powerful. And so Trump has already told us just in the last couple of weeks, I may attack Iran, I may attack Colombia, I may attack Mexico, I may invade Greenland. We don't know of all of this, what is boast and what is not boast, but he sent his deputy out to the cameras, Mr. Stephen Miller, who said, when the president speaks, he isn't just speaking, he means action. President Trump said, don't ask about Iceland right now. In 20 days, ask about Iceland. So,
But
we're in
I think we should believe him, because as incredulous as it sounds, I mean, some of the most bizarre things are coming true. And I want to ask you about Greenland, because, you know, the White House has actually gone on record to say that it's on the table, and using military force too is on the table. Do you think that annexing or buying Greenland, or trying to take it over militarily, is actually now very much in the possibility of happening? And again, that has consequences for America's relations with Europe. This would be huge if he actually went through with this. You think it will happen?
I think that there are two shocking things that are quite possible. Of course, I'm not forecasting anything I cannot predict, but I can only follow what is being claimed. Two things to watch. One is claiming Greenland. The United States doesn't have to do almost anything to take Greenland, so it's not even a military operation. And they've gone out of their way to make this point that it would take about an hour. All the United States has to do is to say it's ours. Is Denmark going to fight with the United States? No. So if the United States claims it, it will fall into the American lap like that. Of course, Europe would finally understand something I've been saying to European leaders for years, which they deny up until this moment, that the United States is a threat to Europe. I've been saying this for many, many years. They're obsessed with Russia, but the one most likely to invade Europe is the United States. This is ironic, it's sad, it's even tragic, but it's true. The other place to watch, even far more dangerous, by the way, is Iran. Iran is in tumult right now. One of the reasons it's in tumult is that the U.S. economic sanctions have crushed the Iranian economy. This is part of the purpose of the U.S. sanctions, to destabilize society. A few months ago, the U.S. and Israel bombed Iran, and the clear intention was to overthrow the government, not only to bomb the nuclear sites, but to overthrow the government. And Israel made no bones about that. It said it very clearly. It failed at the time. But now they're looking at this again. When there is unrest, note two things. First, that the unrest is the result of a concerted long-term strategy of regime change. Iran would not be in unrest, and it would not be in an economic freefall were it not for the United States. The U.S. has tried to kill the economy because of the U.S. Sanctions, the U.S. banking system, and the U.S. seizure of Iranian assets. It can do a great deal of damage and has done so. So this is one part. Second, when you see protests like this, think CIA, and in the case of Iran, think Mossad. These protests usually are funded, usually are backed. Even a former CIA director said a couple of days ago that in the street protests, you can imagine how many Mossad agents are around. In other words, these are not just events that we see unfolding before our eyes. These are contrived theater. These are what we call color revolutions. These are contrived actions. And the reach of Mossad in Iran and the CIA almost everywhere is very, very large. And so we're witnessing a deliberate destabilization. Then when Netanyahu came to the White House for New Year's celebration and probably to plan another war, Trump said, well, I give the green light to Israel if Iran doesn't behave. And then when the protests came, the most typical way that a color revolution works, Trump said, if the government cracks down on the protesters, we're locked and loaded, ready to go against Iran. This is a game, this kind of narrative. We stoke instability. If the government tries to retake order, then we invade because we have a thin cover of humanitarian purpose. So this is what's happening right now. Now, I hope that people understand this.
There was a very interesting point you made about, what would happen with Greenland, and that how if America says and Trump says it's mine, it's ours, that Denmark would fold, and what would they do? It's interesting you say that, because the EU's reaction to what happened in Venezuela has been so lukewarm, it has been so muted, almost polite. With there have been some honorable exceptions around the world, but even the Indian reaction, there's been a lot of criticism back home about Delhi kind of not taking a position. Of course, we don't have high stakes in Latin America and Venezuela, certainly the way other countries do. But how do you read the sort of almost polite deference, from the UK and from other European countries in particular to Trump? Nobody wants to upset him. Even India doesn't want
That's
to
right.
upset him.
This
But
this
that
is
also has consequences. If you don't stand up to a bully, then he will keep coming after you and beating you. I mean, that's what happened in our schoolyard, right?
this is what we call the free rider problem, which is that in truth, if you asked any leader around the world, what do you think? They'd be shocked. Almost any leader. In Israel, they'd be delighted. Maybe in Argentina with the Malay, he'd be delighted. So Trump has a few allies that are of a similar ilk, but the rest of the world would be shocked. But who wants to stand up to be the one to tell the truth? Almost nobody. Everybody says, well, if we stand up, we're going to get, hammered. If India says something, maybe the tariffs will go to 75%. Who knows? So nobody wants to stand up. But the truth of the matter is, this is really a dire situation. It's not just about Venezuela. And
Exactly.
if it were just about Venezuela and the United States weren't saying what it's saying, I would be saying it's not just about Venezuela. But listen to the words of the president himself. He's the one saying it's not just about Venezuela. He's the one saying it's about Mexico, it's about Greenland, it's about Colombia, it's about Iran, it's about Nigeria. This is a long list. Is the world really ready for the United States to do what it wants anywhere that it wants? I hope not. The whole reason we have the UN Charter is that no country should behave like this. Not the United States, not anyone else. It's serious. And it's not me making that case, it's the President of the United States stating clearly. Or maybe I could remind people the United States has bombed 7 countries in the last 12 months. That's a lot. That is every case of a U.S. attack without any kind of UN authorization. Well, that's a route to war. That's not a route to peace or
Do you
cooperation or sovereignty.
do you believe that countries like Russia and China will be emboldened by the steps that America has taken in Venezuela? I mean, what stops the Chinese from capturing Taiwan or any other territory in this part of the world?
Well, first, when it comes to Taiwan, let me just say my own view, which is that Taiwan is part of China. So I don't even want to go there in that sense because that already presupposes an issue. I find it completely provocative that the United States is arming Taiwan. Can you imagine if China was arming the state of Missouri or the state of New York or the state of California? We'd be going berserk. But the United States is arming Taiwan. It's not just talking about Taiwan, it is arming Taiwan. So that I view as a somewhat different issue. But I think there's a bigger point. I think what Trump is doing behooves India, China, Russia, Brazil, South Africa, the 5 original BRICS countries, and now the new BRICS countries and the partners, which is more than half the world's population if you add in the partners. It behooves the BRICS to say, no, this is not the world that we want. It's not what the UN Charter permits. It is not the route to safety. And so, if no individual country wants to take this on, the BRICS as a group, which has the presidency of India this year, I think needs to say, for the sake of the half the world in the BRICS, but also more generally for the whole world, the 96% of the world that is not the United States, we can't have this lawlessness and hope to survive. And if there is an attack on Iran, that will bring us to the nuclear brink. This I want to emphasize. Why? Because Iran is a country of 100 million people. It's got hypersonic missiles. It will not simply fold its hand in a day. It will shoot hypersonic missiles. It could trigger an absolute spiral of catastrophe. So, will some leaders in the world say to Mr. Trump, no, we will not let the world get out of control this way? That, I think, is extremely important. So far, China
That's
has
missing.
spoken very clearly. Uh, Russia has spoken very clearly, but almost no other countries have spoken clearly. And we're close to disaster. In Venezuela, it's Venezuela. It's in the U.S. neighborhood. It's not going to trigger a nuclear war. But believe me, you start looking at Trump's list, it could. And so that's why this matters a lot. I don't think this is about any other country grabbing uh, something in their neighborhood. I think that that's the least of it. Of course, if it happened, you would say yes, the U.S. opened the door to this. But I think that the real point is something else, which is that what the U.S. is doing, and especially the rhetoric around it, not only the brazenness of the action, but the threats all over the world. And mind you, threats are against international law, not just actions, and for good reason, because threats have consequences and they can trigger wars all by themselves. And in
Absolutely.
Article 2 of the UN, threats are not allowed. And so, if the rest of the world just keeps its head down and leaves it to a few academics to say something, my God, what a dangerous world we're going to have.
Well, I mean, quite apart from the Taiwan example, I mean, India has, as you know, a very fraught history and a present with China. And if you look at why India has always emphasized on an international rules-based order, it has been because of our experience, with China as a big neighbor, and who knows what they may claim tomorrow as their territory, and then we are in, in very difficult waters, as it were. My
Well,
final
just let
question,
me
Professor.
let me let me emphasize something
Yeah.
on in that regard. China and India have incredible stakes, both in the UN Charter. And the stakes that are shared by China and India in upholding the UN Charter are the most important stakes facing the two countries. The border issues have been going back to 1907, and they are complicated. But the stakes of both China and India vis-a-vis a lawless United States and vis-a-vis a collapse of not the rules-based order, which is rhetoric, but of the UN Charter, which is not rhetoric, which is our real international law. That's joins the interests of China and India, in my view, the most fundamental interests of all. And so I believe this is an occasion where the BRICS together need to be clear that they support international law, specifically the UN Charter, specifically Article 2, which prohibits the threats or use of force against sovereign countries.
Professor Sachs, just to look for a moment, at how this is playing out within in the U.S. Politically, particularly amongst Trump's MAGA support base, because he made it a virtue, and one of his big talking points in his campaign was that he was not going to be an interventionist president. He was not going to start wars. He would stop them. He wasn't in favor of doing exactly what he's done now in Venezuela. Therefore, we have even seen some Republican leaders express their discomfort at what has happened. Uh, do you see this actually, politically there being a backlash within the MAGA movement with what Trump has done? It goes against everything that he stood for, and certainly what they believe as well.
The consequences actually will depend on the practical follow up. Trump is claiming two things: one, that the U.S. is running Venezuela, and that second, it will therefore be able to bilk it of its oil revenues. So Trump said today in an agreement that is reportedly agreed with the Venezuelan government that Venezuela will ship 50 million barrels of oil to the U.S. refineries. Again, some of that probably would have come to India under contract. But Trump says not only will we do it, but I will control the money. Now, somehow I doubt this is the real description of what's going to happen, but if it is, then it's adding on highway robbery to this outright invasion. It's possible that that's actually the consequences. Now, from the point of view of American politics, what will decide the elections in November, for example, is people's feelings about their jobs and the economy much more than any of this. If uh, the actions in Venezuela somehow are quiet and Trump steals the oil and the consequences are, in that sense, without further repercussion, I don't think this will have much domestic political impact. Uh, if, however, shooting starts in Venezuela, or facts are revealed today that the money really is going to Venezuela and this is not as it said, um, or if there's a war with Iran next week, uh, then I think the consequences will be quite adverse. Let me put it this way. The American people do not want this or support this. This is not jingoism, where we have our newspapers and our media and our political leaders saying, we're the empire, we run things, we're taking over the world. This is bizarre behavior by a small group that is not backed by public opinion, congressional sanction, or anything like that. At the same time, it is not the main shaper of day to day politics, which is the economy, which is not doing well, which is not delivering decent jobs or health care or housing for the American people, which is why Trump's approval rating is under 40%. And his disapproval rating is nearing 60% and going into important elections this fall. So I don't believe that anything Trump is doing, whether it's the tariffs or invading Venezuela, is going to turn around these economic facts. And even the economic boom of the stock market in the US makes some billionaires richer, but doesn't help the average American person. And that's why Trump is a bit, flailing around, because none of his real policies are directed at his base. His base gave him power, but now he's unleashing power for his family wealth, for his friends, for the lobbyists, for Silicon Valley, for the oil companies, not for his own base. But the base doesn't vote on foreign policy ideas. The base votes
Well,
on their pocketbook.
I think, as you also said, though, a lot will depend on how things unfold in Venezuela. And if things do unravel and it goes south, who knows how this could sort of blow up politically. And we've seen the US track record of regime change, whether it was Libya, Afghanistan, Iraq. It's been a disaster. And all
Exactly.
those parts of the world have gone up in flames and it didn't help. So, what's going to happen in Venezuela may not just stay in Venezuela. Professor Jeffrey Sachs, thank you very much for your perspective on this huge, huge story. We are constantly going to be tracking what happens next because we really don't know which place is next. It could be Greenland, like you said, maybe Colombia, but this isn't over. Thank you, Professor Sachs.
Thank you for the opportunity to be with you.
And we will continue to track Trump very closely in 2026. It's only January. Who knows what the rest of the year has in store? Do join us again next week. Goodbye.